Hi there, John Wilkinson, History Made Easier. I'm going to record two videos that look at Mao's 100 Flowers campaign. I think it's a really important issue that maybe some textbooks don't pay enough attention to. It comes in 1956, a really important time for communism worldwide, with Khrushchev's secret speech, and an important time for Mao as he's looking back at the first 5-year economic plan and the plans for a second 5-year plan that will become known as the Great Leap Forward. So I think it's a really important point in both the world history of communism and in the history of Chinese communism. And it enables Mao to consolidate his hold on power and to press forward in the path that he wants China to take. So, this will be the first video, and this video will look at the arguments from historians that rages to this day about just why Mao instigated the 100 Flowers campaign. The CCP's first 5-year plan had met with problems. Nevertheless, it was seen as an economic success. The process of industrializing and catching up with the rest of the industrialized world had begun. There was much still to be done, though, of course, and the leadership was well aware of this. The industrial base was still very small, particularly for a country of China's size, and agriculture needed a technological revolution. The Chinese people in both town and country were still very poor, and the rapid pace of socialization had left contradictions, notably a hugely bureaucratic state and the accompanying emergence of a new political, administrative and economic elite. What was of more concern, however, was that this bureaucratic elite was already distanced, alienated from society at large. This was particularly the case in the cities, where the discipline in the factory was replicated in private life, and where intellectuals felt more restricted than they had ever been. The intellectuals who had originally supported the communists and who would be increasingly needed if the People's Republic of China was to truly modernize and lift its people out of poverty, caused most concern. Then came Nikita Khrushchev's bombshell, the secret speech denouncing Stalin's crimes against the Soviet Union's Communist Party. This was made in the closed final session of the 20th Congress of the Soviet Union's Communist Party in February 1956. Mao and the CCP had for decades been singing the praises of Stalin. Never mind what Mao might have really thought. The saviour of all the oppressed, said Mao on Stalin's 60th birthday. The teacher and friend of mankind, of the Chinese people. Mao on Stalin's 70th birthday. The greatest genius of the present age, Mao on Stalin's death. how was the leadership going to explain Khrushchev's criticisms? The full text of the speech was kept from the Chinese people, but its main points began to filter down quite quickly through the party levels, and parts of the speech, translated from the English version, appeared in public by 1957. And if socialism was a higher level of development, as all communists believed, how was the party to explain that the Soviet model of socialism, which they had copied, could allow Stalin to place himself above the party? The charge that Stalin had used a cult of personality to present himself, to position himself above the party, struck Mao as an attack on him as well. This leads some historians to interpret Mao's call in April 1956 to let 100 flowers bloom and 100 schools of thought contend as an attempt to portray himself as distinctly more liberal compared to Stalin. So it was in this context that the 100 Flowers campaign was launched. Lu Dingyi, the CCP's head of propaganda, hailed the new campaign as evidence that we, the party, stand for freedom of independent thinking, of debate, of creative work, freedom to criticize and freedom to express, maintain and reserve one's opinion on questions of art, literature or scientific research. As for Mao, he argued that the party shouldn't be scared of criticism, that contradictions, as he always called them, would continue to exist, that the party didn't have a monopoly on correct ideas. He again urged the intelligentsia to share their views, and that the ideas of the intelligentsia were needed. He also described the campaign as something akin to vaccinating the masses by exposing them to harmful ideas. He even went so far as to say that Chiang Kai-shek's works should be published, or else how can the people criticize them? Everyone should have a voice. And Mao could put these things in very brutal language. If they have something to fart about, he said to party colleagues, let them fart. If it's let out, then one can decide whether it smells bad or good. If the people think their farts stink, they will be isolated. One historian, Philip Short, in his biography of Mao, sees this as the most ambitious attempt ever undertaken in any communist country to combine a totalitarian state with democratic checks and balances. That's one view. But before the campaign was really underway, events in Eastern Europe led Mao to think again about the situation in China. Khrushchev's speech had raised hopes in Eastern Europe that a more liberal period was dawning, and led to popular reforms in countries across the East European bloc, notably the revolt in Poland in June 1956 and the even bigger revolt in Hungary in October 1956. Many of you guys will have studied that in your IGCSE course. This appalled Mao, leading historians to offer different interpretations of what the 100 Flowers movement would eventually unleash. Was it to avoid the mistakes of Stalin and the leaders in the Eastern Bloc, enable the party to get closer to the people and hear their concerns? Or, far from being seen as more liberal than Stalin, had Mao set out to encourage criticism and different schools of thought, only in order to crush those who voiced them and maintain his firm control of how socialism in China would develop? Other historians argue that it was control over the party that was uppermost in Mao's mind, that Mao was concerned about both the direction and the pace of socialization the party seemed happy to adopt. Mao wanted to move radically from the heavily bureaucratic Soviet model, whereas the party seemed to be content to continue on that line. And he felt that the successful collectivization of land pointed to the opportunity of a much faster pace than the party seemed to think was possible. It was the party that was to be rectified, and the non-party intelligentsia was the instrument to be used for that purpose.